And functional medicine is really kind of like a cross between Western medicine and Eastern medicine. And so they bring a little bit more of understanding how the mind influences the body into into the practice of medicine. And so it really resonated with me. And I started understanding like how my mind was shifting the chemistry in my body, so much so that I wasn't able to get pregnant again. And when I learned all this stuff, I was like, oh my God, people don't understand this. They don't understand how their lifestyle or their belief systems are affecting their physical body. And so I quit what I was doing in biotech. I left that career of close to 20 years, and I went into functional medicine. And then that's what I do. So I do functional medicine, and I also do energy medicine. But what I mean by that is I'm not laying hands on anyone or doing anything that way, but I really teach people how to run their own energy and how their mind is influencing their energy and how to expand their energy system so they can create health in the body. And so that's really what I like to do, is to teach people who they are, what this reality is, and how disease is created in the body, because the body is really just a reflection of the mind. And so when we understand ourselves differently, when we don't think of ourselves as this limited human being, but when we actually understand ourselves as our eternal selves, not just as a concept, but actually feel our eternal selves, or begin to feel our eternal selves, because it's not something that just happens overnight. In the night that I'm going to talk about, it kind of did, but that's not the norm. It's really, in my experience and what I've seen from others, it's really a progression. It's a process of changing your understanding, reprogramming your conditioning, and understanding what this reality really is. And in the process, you really elevate your health and you stop creating disease in the body. So let me start with what happened that night. So I was coming home from Christmas. It was December 29th, 2018. I had been spending Christmas up in Montana with my brother and his family. And my daughter and I flew home. And at that time I was dating someone I lived with someone who was a healer. And he was actually supposed to leave. We were literally going to be passing each other on the freeway. I was coming home and he was going to leave. But his intuition kept telling him to stay. And so he decided just to stay. And so he picked us up at the airport. That was really nice. And it was a surprise. And we went home. And that night was really uneventful. And then the next night, it was close. It was in the evening. And I was getting ready to lay down next to my daughter because she wasn't feeling well. And I brought my book in to lay down next to her. And as I was laying down, I felt really lightheaded, and everything in the room started moving. I kind of stopped and looked, and I could see even, the walls were shifting. They were going in and out and up and down. And the space between me and the wall was also moving. I'd never seen anything like it before. And I sat up and I thought, did I just sit down too fast? Did I get dizzy? Normally you get that when you stand up too fast, but I didn't know what to call it. I didn't understand what was happening. And so I sat up and I felt really lightheaded and extremely lightheaded. And I thought, the thought went through my mind, am I having a stroke? And the thought also that went through my mind is, I remember my cousin saying that when you have a stroke, she's a nurse, that there's no pain. And so I thought, okay, there's no pain. Maybe this is a stroke, because I'd never experienced anything like it. And so I got up and I didn't feel like I was in my body, and I didn't feel like I was separate from the space anymore. It felt like I was at one with the space. There was no barrier between me and the space. It was like my skin or my physical body was less dense. It was like it was equivalent to the air. I didn't feel like I could see it, but I didn't feel it like I normally do. And so I sat up and I thought, I need to get to my partner who was down the hall. And I got up, but I felt super light. And I remember thinking I needed to use something for support because it just felt so odd. And so I started walking down the hall and I was putting my hand out to touch the wall, but my hand was going through the wall. And I started going down the hallway and then I opened the door and he turned to look at me and I said, I don't know what's happening. I said, maybe you should call 911. I said, I don't know how to explain what's going on with me. And at first he kind of smiled because he didn't, I think he thought I was joking, but then he turned to look at me and he kept zeroing in on me. And he said, I will if you want me to. And so I trusted him and I felt like he knew. And so we sat down on the edge of the bed and I just said, I was trying to explain what was happening, but I couldn't. I just said, I feel like I'm leaving. And I felt like I was coming out of the crown of my head. And again, I've never experienced anything like this before. So that was new to me, but I felt like I was coming out of the crown of my head. And I started to fold over like in the fetal position. But then I thought of my daughter and I thought, I'm not leaving. I'm not going. I don't want to go. And so I started to say, I don't want to go. And then I changed it. Instead of saying I'm not going, I said, I'm staying, because I was really careful, conscious of my words. And I said, I'm staying. I'm staying. And I just kept saying it. And I kept looking up and I said, I'm staying. I'm staying. I'm staying. I'm staying. And I was holding his hand and I felt like that was grounding me a bit because I was squeezing really hard. So it was pulling me back in the body. And then I felt over a short period of time, I felt this overwhelming gratitude. Like my heart just was expanding. And I felt like I just was so grateful for all the experiences that I had had, good and bad, like all of it. I knew all of it was perfect the way it was. Everything in my life was perfect the way it was. And then I was like saying how grateful to him. I was saying how grateful to him for our relationship. And I was so grateful for my daughter and for his kids and for, I named off everybody, even including my ex-husband. And then, and as I'm talking to him, my heart starts going like this. It was like bzzz, tachycardia. It was like really pumping hard, just vibrating really, really fast. And I just looked at him and I said, the heart's beating fast. And he put his hand over my heart and then he came to my side and he put one hand here and one hand over my head. And I just kept saying, I'm staying. I am staying. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. I'm staying. I'm staying. And it was like I was looking up and just saying that. Or I must have said it 1,000 times that night. It was like a mantra. And then I looked up at him at one point and he said, shh. He said, you're getting an upgrade. And I was like, I had no idea what that meant. And I didn't care. I just was like, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. And later on, I asked him how he knew that. And he said, he just didn't he didn't sense death. He just didn't sense death. So anyway, after a while, I kept saying that. And then I said, I started feeling the urge to vomit. And at this point, now I'm thinking, this sounds like my mom. So my mom died of a stroke, basically. They didn't call it a stroke, but it basically a blood vessel broke in her head. And her brain hemorrhaged and she died. And so now I'm thinking this whole experience feels like what I heard she went through, because I wasn't there, but she told my cousin, because my cousin was around, and she told my cousin that she wasn't seeing straight. Like her eyes were were off, her eyesight was off. And then after about 45 minutes, she had to vomit. So at this point, when I had to vomit, I was thinking, oh my God, this sounds like my mom. Because me not being able to see, or me seeing the space move, the walls move, was kind of like me not, something wrong with my eyesight. And then I had to vomit. So now I look at him and I tell him, I have to throw up. I have to do it. And he said, I'll help you. And I said, maybe you should call 911. And he said, I will if you want me to. And again, that I trusted him, and I felt like he knew whether I would need it or not. And so we walked towards the bathroom. And I went into my daughter's room first because I kind of wanted to say goodbye without saying goodbye. So I walked into her room and I said, Nadia, I love you, but I'm staying. So I wasn't going to admit defeat. And then I went into the bathroom and I bent down and I looked up at him because I thought maybe this is the last time I'm going to see him, because basically after my mom vomited that night, she didn't really respond at all anymore. And my cousin called the 911 and they came and got her, and that was it. She died about 10 days later. And so at this point, I'm thinking this might be it. And so, but I also knew that if I held on, if I stifled this flow of energy that was coming out of me, that might cause my brain to hemorrhage more. And so I just wanted to let it flow. So I bent down and I threw up, and then I was still here. So after I threw up, I was like, okay, I'm still here. And I still kept saying, I'm staying over and over again. And by this time, my daughter figured out what was going on. She comes in and she's crying and I'm holding her. And then I just said, let's move into the other room. And so we started walking down the hall. And as we're walking down the hall, I feel this rush of liquid that I can only describe it as like liquid electric energy. That's the only thing I can describe it as. And it just like flooded my entire system. It felt like it came from here. That's all I can describe. And it just went like, and then every single cell in my body like went off like a light. It was like I was reborn. Every single cell just like went pop. And it's like stardust, but it felt even more magnificent than stardust. It felt like I was a light being. And in a split second, everything. So I had a shoulder injury that was for like 2 years, and I could barely lift up a glass, and I couldn't turn a door handle. I couldn't lift up or turn the faucet on. It burned, and that was just gone in a split second. I also had Hashimoto's disease, autoimmune of the thyroid, and then that was gone. Everything in my body was just healed in that moment. And I was jumping up and down. Like right now, I do have resistance in my arms, so I don't feel that way still, but I have resistance here. So when I take my arm back, I can barely, take it back here, and that's it. But that night, my arms and my limbs, my legs were flying everywhere. It was as if you took a Raggedy Ann doll and you could just shake her like that. That's how my whole body was. So that shoulder that I could barely lift up was just it was completely healed in that moment. I was jumping up and down. I felt ecstatic. It was like pure bliss. It was like feeling like a star, like a million, but it was like a million stars. Every single cell in my body, everything felt like just this, like I was a light being. And I was jumping up and down, and I was like, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God. Because in one moment, I think I'm dying. In the next moment, my body feels like a light being. So it was the most magnificent feeling I could ever imagine. It was beyond what my human mind could have ever thought was possible. And I had just gotten back earlier that month from Joe Dispenza's retreat, Dr. Joe Dispenza's retreat. And he always says, when you ask for something from the field of existence, right? You say, bring it to me in a way that I'll least expect it. And so when that happened and I was jumping up and down and I was saying, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, I go, bring it to me in a way that I least expected. I was like, oh my God, I could have never imagined something like that. Like, yes, that definitely fit that criteria. Bring it to me in a way that I would least expect it. And so I just kept jumping up and down, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I turned to look at my partner, and he's just like lighting candles, turning down the lights, lighting a fire. And I was like, it didn't even faze him, because he's seen some really interesting stuff. So it didn't even faze him in the least. So it was really surprising. And immediately I started breathing, like I was going like this. And no one told me to. And it was just like an instinct to just start breathing that way. So I was inhaling, and I could feel the life force, the energy from the air flow into every single cell of my body. It was like the cleanest, purest water or air flowing down all the way into my toes. And I'd never been able to feel like that before when I was breathing. And I could take in enormous amounts of air. It was like I could just keep going. Like it would just keep going and going and going. And it would just fill my entire body. And it was like my body became less dense in that moment and afterwards.